Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm I'm from University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Today, I will talk about signal molecule measurements using fluorescence techniques. And it is also a special occasion for me because the person who really invented the biological fluorescence field was a professor at my university, Gregory Weber. He was from Argentina, I heard. And right. And Dr. Silva, who gave a talk yesterday, was a fellow student in Urbana-Champaign, as well as younger generation undergraduate who gave a talk yesterday, who was trained in Urbana under an undergrad home. So the goal, the theme of my lab is to develop new methods to determine the structure-function relationship of a biomolecule. You hear this term structure-function relations in biochemistry. What it usually means is the following. You make a change or mutate the primary structure of DNA or protein and RNA and see what happens to the function. What I mean by this is a little bit different. So here is the structure of a can opener. And if you haven't seen it before, you may not actually know what it does, just looking at the structure. Of course, the function is to open a can. And the best way to learn how the can opener functions is to watch somebody use the device in real time. And you know that the can opener has to change its shape repeatedly to carry out its function. And the same is true for many biological molecules. And there are many tools that can give you structural information, even at the atomic level, X-ray, crystallography, or NMR. And there are also many biochemical tools that can tell you about the function. But what you really want to do is to measure the structural changes while they're functioning in real time. Okay? So you can actually make correlations between the structural changes and functions. So that's what we want to do, mainly using fluorescence techniques and by looking at single molecules. So how do you detect single molecules? This is a protein called helicase, and just by itself, it is actually very difficult to detect the protein because there's not much signal coming from one protein. Okay? So what we actually mean is that we just attach a fluorescent biomolecule made of a few aromatic rings, so typically up to 10 angstrom in the long dimension, to the particular side on the protein surface, and you detect the fluorescent molecules. So that's really what. So really the question is how do you detect single fluorescent molecules? Well, you have to lower the sample concentration enough so that you have at most one molecule per detection volume. You also have to make sure that your signal is larger than the background. So you have to turn down the background. So that's why we do measurements in the dark room. And fluorescence detection is actually ideal for this because in this energy diagram, a molecule can be excited from the ground state, the excited state, via the absorption of a single photon. And this then quickly relaxes down to the bottom of the excited state. And then about a nanosecond later, it comes down emitting a photon of a lower energy. And then it comes down to the ground state, bottom of the ground state. And this can go on and on many times. And because of the energy difference between the absorption and emitted photons, you can actually use filters made of interference filters or absorption filters that you can buy for $100 to just cut out the laser excitation line. So this is a laser excitation line. And you can actually use a filter to reject the laser scatter light and collect only the fluorescent signal. Therefore, so that you can do nearly background-free detection of molecules, and so that you can even measure single molecules. Next question is what are the observables? What do the fluorescent molecules tell you about the biological system that you are studying? At the simplest level, it tells you that the biomolecule is there. Basically, this molecule is telling you that I'm here, waving its hand. So it's localization. Let's see if it works. So here I'm showing you a movie of single fluorescent molecules attached to lipid molecules. And what you're seeing here is a supporting bilayer of lipid bilayer on top of the glass support. As the lipid molecules diffuse, and some of the molecules are labeled fluorescently, you can just see them diffuse around on the membrane. And nowadays, people can do these measurements also on the membranes of the living cells. So that's one way of doing measurements using fluorescent molecules. Another way is to measure the intensity fluctuations of a molecule. And fluorescence is a very sensitive measure of the local environment, so this can give you a lot of extra information. Fluorescent molecule is also a dipole emitter. So a molecule will observe light that is polarized mainly in one direction. And same is true, emission is also polarized along a certain direction, so that when you actually measure the polarization response of a single molecule, you can actually gain information about its orientation to the laboratory frame, which can be useful in many experiments. The main thing that we do is a technique called fluorescence resonance energy transfer, where we utilize the interaction between two molecules. There are two primary ways of measuring fluorescence at the single molecule level. One is Confocal and the other is TIR. And the two mainly differ in terms of time resolution and throughput. In Confocal, you're using a focused laser light to excite a single molecule and detect the signal from the same molecule. And using point detectors that have very high time resolution. So you get much better time resolution than in this case, but you can only measure one molecule at a time. So your throughput is limited. But in TIR, TIR means total integral reflection application, where you excite a sizable area where you have more than 100 molecules, and then detect fluorescence from many, many molecules at the same time. So you can get highest throughput, but your time resolution is limited by the speed of the camera itself. So the best you can do is probably 2 milliseconds. We can also split the emission into two different colors using a very simple trick, and then use the same camera to detect the signals from the same set of molecules but in two different colors, or even three different colors. So there are four subjects I want to cover today. One is the use of single fluorescent molecules, the localization, to follow the movements of molecular motors. The second one is a kind of variation of this method, but to obtain super resolution imaging of cells with down to 20 nanometer or 10 nanometer resolution, beating the diffraction limit substantially. The animation is not looking properly, but that's the third one is a couple of applications in using FRET for single molecule measurements. And finally, this is a combination of fluorescence and optical track, hybrid technique. And I have to tell you that these two are mainly done in my lab, and we also were part of this project. And this one is done by other labs that are so exciting, so I decided to show some data from their work. Okay, so in cells, there are many tracks on which molecular motors move along. And there are actin filaments and microtubules. So kinesin moves on microtubules shown in orange using ATP as a fuel. And myosin 5 moves on actin filaments using again ATP. And helicases enzymes and move on DNA, also using ATP. I think I used this slide when I gave a talk in Korea, that's why I have this. So this is an animation of kinesin walking on microtubule. And it shows this so-called hand-over-hand mechanism where two heads alternate in binding to the track. But Jeff Gillis in 2002 published a paper saying that maybe this is not correct. Maybe the kinesin may walk on this microtubule in an interim mechanism where one foot always stays ahead of the other, like interim motion. And then actually people realized that there was not really a definitive experiment to distinguish between the two. And the reason really was that all the measurements are done until then were by attaching a large object to the kinesin molecule, to the body. Okay? So that the two different models could not be distinguished just measuring the movement of the center of mass of the molecule. In order to distinguish between the two, actually what you have to do is to look at the movement of one of the two heads, a foot, so that in the hand over hand, if my center of body moves by a half a meter each time I take a step, but my foot will move by a meter, twice that center of mass move distance. And the next time, no movement, and then a meter, and so on. That's hand over hand. But if you do interim, then each time my foot will move by half a meter. Okay? But if you can't really put this huge object to the foot and hope that the motor will still function, so you have to attach a very small load. And so this is done by attaching a single fluorescent molecule somewhere here. And since kinesin takes smaller steps, 8 nanometers than myosin 5, initial measurements are done on myosin 5, which take much larger steps. So this is the idea. So you take an image of a single fluorescent molecule using the CCD camera. You can see pixels here. Pixel size is about 80 nanometers. So you see a peak there. And although the width of the peak is given by the diffraction limit down to about half the wavelength of the light being used, you can actually determine the center of this peak much better than the width by using the Gaussian fitting of this image. And if you have enough photons, so it's really a matter of signal-to-noise ratio, then you can determine the center location down to about 1.5 nanometers. So that, so my biggest contribution to this work was the acronym that I came up with for my colleague Paul Savin. So it's Fiona, Princess Fiona in Shrek. Yeah, I think I watched it 100 times because of my kids. But many people do not realize that Fiona is an acronym for fluorescence imaging with 1 nanometer accuracy. And here, they're always very important, 1 nanometer, because people talk about the nanoscale science if the thing that they study is maybe smaller than 100 nanometer. Right? But here we are really talking about 1 nanometer, relative 1.5 nanometer. So again, if you have a mountain, you can actually find the center of the mountain much better than the width of the mountain if you have good signal-to-noise ratio. So a student in Paul Savin's lab obtained this myosin 5 protein from Gary Goldman's lab, and then they suspended the actin filament on a glass surface, and then the labeled myosin 5 was observed walking on this actin filament. This takes a center of mass step of 37 nanometers. So prediction is that if you have a hand over hand, then the foot should move in increments of twice the distance, 74 nanometers, and so on. And in fact, this is showing the position of that foot as a function of time. And you can see beautiful steps. And the step size on average was 74 nanometers, really showing that it moves by the hand-over-hand mechanism. So it's really a definitive experiment. And 74 nanometers sounds like a very small number, but it's not. You can actually see it in this movie I show you. And because the pixel size is 80 nanometers, it moves by almost a pixel, but in the diagonal direction, in this direction. So you can actually watch the movie and then analyze the data, fit the data using your brain, and then determine the steps. There was a step. And there was a step. So this yes.
So my question was, I had been led to believe in the talk somewhere that the motion along these active filaments was sort of helical. The motion of these motors is sort of helical. How do you deal with that in an experiment where you attach it to the slide and it can't, the motor can't spiral around?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. I can show you another slide. Let's see. That's a slide that I couldn't show yesterday. So all the tracks I have talked about are helical. So there's a helical symmetry. The question is, when the motor processes move, do they follow the helical track, rotating around the track, or do they simply walk, straight? Okay. And so this is a nice experiment done by the Kinoshita group. Active filament was suspended in solution using two large beads, so that there's no constraint underneath. And they attached two double beads, but two small beads to the mice in 5, and they watched it move. So, and it rotates around it. Now, but does it rotate following this helical periodicity? No. It's actually much slower than that. So it does not actually rotate around the filament each time taking. So you take a bit of a step to the right, okay? And it adds up, but you need to move by about maybe half a micron to make one turn, not 74 nanometers. But that's a very good point, right? So if you actually have a constraint underneath, then you cannot rule out the possibility that you actually perturbing that. That's why people do these kind of measurements too. Yeah, these are all very, very difficult experiments to do. So if you go to the Biophysical Society meeting, there are, literally, 100 posters every day on single molecule experiments, and it's very nice because students are really to talk to each other, and they tell you everything that they're working on, because there's no chance somebody else will go back home and then scoop them, right? Because it takes a lot of effort to set things up, and quite difficult experiments. Okay. So now this is more of a layering the coffin or beating the dead soldier kind of experiment. So done by a couple of different groups, but this was the probably most elegant work done by David Varsha in Vermont. So what the idea is that now you can imagine attaching two different biomolecules, one to each foot, but different color. Then if you actually measure the position of each foot as a function of time, you'll imagine that green foot may move by 74 nanometers, followed by movement of the red foot. Okay? And that's what you see. So you can see two dots moving, and they are actually occurring in staggered manner. Yeah, fully expected from the hand of a hand, but it's still nice to see. And in this experiment, they actually, instead of attaching a single fluorescent molecule, they attach quantum dots that are larger and then much brighter to the molecule. You can also obtain the angular information. And if you attach the fluorescent molecule in a rigid way to the myosin 5, then it's, when you look at the image using the CCD, and if you defocus the microscope a little bit, then instead of getting a nice circular shape, you get this weird looking patterns. In fact, you can use theoretical calculations to even calculate these patterns, and that depends on the angle of the dipole moment in the 3D. This way you can actually deduce these angles while you are taking the stacking data and show that angle is also changing. So if you imagine attaching a diode here, then whenever I take a step, this angle may change. That can also be seen. Okay, so now I want to move on to the next topic of super resolution imaging. There are two competing technologies with two different acronyms. So one is called PALM, the other one is called STONE. PALM by Eric Patrick and STONE by Xiaowei Zhuang. So let me start with this. PALM stands for photo-activated localization microscopies. You use photoactivation to localize the individual molecules and build microscopic image. So the idea is really elegant. So if you have a cell, and there are many proteins in this region of the cell, and if you do regular fluorescence imaging, then because you have very low spatial resolution, you just see some blobs. Okay? You can't really any substructures. However, if you somehow make sure that only a few of them are active at any given time, okay? And this can be done by using photoactivatable fluorescence proteins. So these are proteins that can be made dark by shining a particular color of light. And then using a different color, you apply brief pulse of light, then just a few of them will become alive. Then you can do Fiona on each one of them to find the center with a few nanometer precision, depending on how many photons you can get. And you do this many times, so that you can actually build high resolution imaging, even when your sample is very dense. So I have this movie, how you actually assemble the palm imaging. So what's shown in the middle is the basically far field regular imaging of fluorescence signal from a cell sample. And this is a final construction of the super resolution image. The way it's done is by taking snapshots of the sample with only a few of them active, and then finding the centers with precision. So let me show you this movie. the trick here is that at any given moment you don't want to have too many fluorescent molecules there, because then you cannot really just find and fit the data from a single molecule. They eventually can get a very high resolution image. This is another illustration prepared by Chavez Wang. So if you have 9 fluorescent molecules that are very close to each other, so if you do regular imaging, you get just a blob. Okay? You cannot even see them. But in this case, her technique is called storm for stochastic reconstruction microscopy. So you shine light to activate in one molecule, and you find the center with great precision, and you do this for other molecules. Then you build your image, okay? And then you can see individual molecules in this image. So this is a nice demonstration. This is a microtubule stain with some antibodies and fluorescent molecule in a cell, and that's the image of the regular resolution. You can see the same scale by 5 micron. And if you do this stone, then you get much better resolution. You can see immediately. And this is a comparison of the two area. They can also do this in 2 colors. So label the 2 different parts of the cell using different colors, and then you can obtain a multicolor fluorescence imaging, also with about 20 nanometer resolution. That's more than effective and better than the conventional limit. Zooming in, and again, notice the scale by 1 micron. So you can see a lot more of what's going on. Now, what's shown here is the object called platinum coated kit, and people thought this is a spherical object. If you do this type of imaging, you are collecting everything into one plane, so you cannot really tell whether this is really a spherical shell or something else. Right? So what they did in the subsequent work was to do a 3D version of this work by inserting a cylindrical lens somewhere in the optics. You can actually change the shape of the spot depending on the degree of defocusing from the center of the imaging plane. And then by fitting the data, you can also gain the Z information. Then you can reconstruct the image in 3D. So what used to be just flat image, then if you then take a section using this 3D, then you can just see that the thing is really hollow in the middle. Okay, so now the third one that we are actually working on is a technique called the FAPERJ. It was invented by Powerstroke in Germany, I think just after the World War II, and this has become really a popular technique for both cell biology and for biochemistry and biophysics. In this technique, you have 2 fluorescent molecules called a donor and acceptor, shown in green and red. And if you excite the green molecule using a blue laser, you normally get a green photon coming out. But if you bring a second molecule nearby, within a few nanometers, then energy can be transferred from the donor to the acceptor directly without actually undergoing real emission of a real photon. And then acceptor will give you a red photon instead. So how many, when you excite the green molecule 100 times, how many photons do you actually get from the red molecule? That's the measure of energy transfer. It's called energy transfer efficiency, or FAPERJ efficiency. And that is a strong function of distance r between the two molecules. It's a 6 power because of the dipole interaction, where the relevant length scale is a few nanometers, which is really ideal for the study of many biological molecules, proteins, DNA, and RNA. So that if you have two molecules very close to each other, then you get signal mainly from the red molecule when they are about the same, this distance r0, then similar emission intensities, and when they're far away from each other, you get mostly green signal. So by just measuring the relative intensities of the two molecules, then you can get some information about the distance between the two. And if you imagine attaching them to particular locations of a biomolecule, then you can use it to measure the conformational changes of a biomolecule in a given time. Nowadays, you can even do these measurements at the single molecule level. So this is one illustration. So if you want to study an enzyme that carries out a certain function of popping the balloon, then you can then attach the green and red molecules to the enzyme and then measure the intensities of the two as a function of time. So when they are close to each other, then you get mostly red signal. But as the protein undergoes conformational changes, then you will see the distance change resulting in the changes in the relative intensities of the two molecules in an anticovalent manner. And finally, final reaction happens there. So that's the idea. And here's an example of a typical movie that we can take in the lab. This is the RNA molecule called ribosome. Well, it doesn't really mix, but it's known to fold in a ligation-dependent manner between this more compact structure and the unfolded form. It goes back and forth. And in this form, you get short separation, high thread, low thread. That's the idea. And if you look at this field of view, I combine the red and green movies into one by mapping them mathematically and then coloring them in pseudo color. Then you see many spots, each coming from single RNA molecule, immobilized to a glass surface using biochemical polymer, a very well-known molecular glue in a very specific way. And then you can actually pick out some molecules that are switching colors between the red and yellow because of the folding-unfolding reaction. Yes?
I have a question based on the diagram. Before you show the energy as a function of the RZ minus 6 currents,
Yeah.
but you also see intercom orientation of the dipoles, so like powerstroke, or you just use powerstroke as an example for your measurements?
Okay, that's a very good question. Some of you are familiar with the threads. Like, let me just mention that the thread occurs due to dipole-dipole interaction. So the orientation of each dye is an important determinant of the amount of energy transfer that you get. In many experiments, their relative orientations are actually randomized for many different reasons. So you don't have to worry too much about it. And especially in our cases, we don't actually show, you don't plot distances, you just show a thread. Right? So, and as long as you can assign what the height state must be the folded state, and then you're fine. But this actually becomes an issue under some conditions. We actually have a very nice experiment done where we have double-strand DNA separated two biomolecules. But at the end of the double-strand DNA, our donor acceptor molecules, IG side 5, are known to stack at the end at the terminal base pair. So their orientation is actually relatively fixed to the and so that if you have about 10 base pairs separated two molecules, then that's one complete helical turn of the DNA. Then the dipole field of one dipole will be in the same direction as the second dipole orientation. So you get maximum interaction, maximum thread. But if you make the DNA longer by 2.5 base pairs, then it rotates by 90 degrees, and then you get minimum energy transfer, and then maximum again. So that in fact you can then get the thread modulated by this the DNA length with a 5-base periodicity, and then we can maybe see that. Okay. So under some special conditions, dipole orientation does matter, but not on the things that I showed you today.
So do you detect the dipole orientation by the intensity of the inside of the
Yes. As long as the molecule it has fixed relative to the laboratory frame, you can use polarized light or polarized emission detection to deduce the dipole orientation as well. Yes.
I see that the red is oscillating differently from point to point. They have different time cycles.
Yes. So, but I think that's a very good point. And in fact, when I show this movie, I have to. There are some molecules that flick on and off fairly rapidly, so that it's I point at that molecule that is very easy to illustrate the spread dynamics. But some molecules are folding on a much slower time scale, and that's actually a built-in heterogeneity we think is intrinsic to the molecule. So although they are under the same condition, they actually show very different kinetics if you look at different molecules that differ by up to about 100-fold among molecules. And this is a very common feature that you discover in single molecule experiments. It's actually rather uncommon to see the molecules are all behaving the same way. But this is actually a bit of an extreme example. So then you can then measure the intensity of the green and red channels of a single molecule and plot this as a function of time. And you can see they are going up and down in an anti-correlated manner due to folding and folding reaction. And you can also calculate the thread efficiency, which is approximated by the ratio between the red intensity and the total intensity of the molecule. So when thread is high, that means you get red high, green low, and when the two molecules are very close to each other.
Do you do any application in the movie? Is it the reason that you get 10 frames per second? Or is the limitation of 10?
So this was obtained maybe 6 years ago when we had the older generation camera that no one in my group wants to use anymore. So that's to get the best image, we had to use 100 millisecond time resolution. Now we can take really nice data, no problem with 15 millisecond time resolution using a new generation. So in fact, the data that I showed next was obtained using 15 millisecond time resolution. But there's no averaging where the data time trace is shown with that time resolution. Okay, let me just briefly introduce a biological system that we study here. So this is the structure of the DNA double helix in a famous paper by Watson and Crick. And in this paper, they ended the paper by using this sentence. So it has not escaped our notice that the specific pairing suggests a possible copying mechanism for the genetic material. And this is considered by many to be the understatement of the century, the last century. And in fact, I read a book by Watson, and apparently after they published the paper, they actually got worried that somebody else may propose this more explicit manner and take the credit for the discovery, and also the big prize, the Nobel Prize. So they, a month later, they published another paper in the same journal, proposing this base pairing as a mechanism for copying of genetic material. And then, then the rest is history. But this paper had this final paragraph. So even if everything is correct here, there are still many things to discover. And for example, if the base pairing is so stable, what makes the chains separate and unwind to make copies of each strand? So about 30 years later, 25 years later, people discovered a class of enzymes called helicases that actually catalyze unwinding of double-strand DNA into single strand using ATP as the fuel. So the canonical function of a helicase is to move on the double-stranded DNA to separate or unwind the DNA into two strands. But it is also known that many of these helicases can use ATP hydrolysis to move on the single-stranded DNA, okay, in a directional manner. You know that DNA has the directionality. So some move in a 3' to 5' direction, others in the opposite direction. So to me, this translocation or motor function is the most fundamental of all activities of these enzymes. And DNA unwinding or protein displacement could be perhaps even a side effect that the nature wants to utilize based on the fundamental translocation activity. So we're really trying to get down to the bottom of this mechanism of translocation of this slow motor. And the one that we been studying is called rat helicase from E. coli. It's a 3' to 5' helicase, meaning that if you want to see unwinding of duplex in vitro, then you need to have a 3' single-strand DNA tail. So presumably protein will bind to the tail first and moves along the single strand in the 3' to 5' direction, displacing the top strand. And it has been shown using bulk studies that a monomer, a single protein, can move on the DNA using ATP hydrolysis. So it's a motor protein as a monomer, but cannot unwind DNA as a monomer. So you need to have two or more proteins to show unwinding in vitro. So what we decided to do was to use this kind of substrate as our DNA, and we actually did measurement at very low protein concentrations so that we don't have to worry about unwinding. Just focus on translocation of the single-stranded DNA tail here. So that's the idea. So we attach a single fluorescent molecule, donor, to a known location on the protein using site-directed mutagenesis and system engineering. And then if the protein moves toward the 5' end, which is labeled with the acceptor site 5' here, then you expect to see fluorescence signal change where green is going down gradually and red is going up gradually. I have to also mention that the single-strand DNA set is highly flexible, okay, with a persistence length of 1 or 2 nanometers to the 5 nucleotides. So that and so it's really not high resolution. It actually, its conformations are fully averaged. So what you're measuring is here is really time average distance between the two molecules. So how do we do the measurement? Well, we start with a slide made of quartz, and we coat it with aminopropylsolvent, present some amino groups to the surface, and then we buy a polyethylene glycol packed with amino-functional amino-reactive groups so that it can actually passivate the surface with a dense polymer coating, polymer brush, so that proteins that we want to study do not stick to the underlying glass surface. And this is a very important technology. And some of the PEG molecules have a biotin label at the end. Then we add a protein called streptavidin that has 4 binding pockets for biotin. And the biotin binding to streptavidin is the strongest known non-covalent bonding with a binding constant below femtomolar. And because you have 4 binding pockets, some of them are available, then you bring in DNA, this partial duplex DNA with a biotin at the end. So you can then immobilize the DNA specifically. And DNA carries the red molecule acceptor at the partial duplex junction. And then finally, we add the helicase and ATP in solution. And they just take movies of the same sample using the TIL microscopy. And this is nice because of the rapid decay of the excitation field over maybe 100 nanometer length scale, so that many of the protein molecules in bulk solution do not contribute background signal to our measurement. So you have the DNA on the surface and without septum. And protein is degrading in solution. You don't see the protein because it's moving so rapidly until it binds to the DNA. Then you see fluorescence start appearing in your screen on the location. And then you can measure intensities of the two dye molecules as a function of time. So what you hope to see is this. So you want to see increase in FAP. And we thought that once that has happened, then protein cannot unwind the DNA. So it simply dissociate from the DNA. So this is the data from a single molecule as a function of time, showing basically zero intensities for the green and red before protein binding. And then as time goes on, you see a sudden increase in the intensities due to a single protein binding. We can show that this is a single protein by measuring the intensities, so on. And then this is followed by the gradual decrease in green and gradual increase in red. The bottom shows the FAP as a function of time, which also shows a gradual increase, consistent with the idea that this is moving in this direction. Okay? And so we were very excited to see this, but then my collaborator, Tim Lowe, already knew this based on more conventional bulk phase chemistry. But what was actually really exciting and novel was what happened afterward. So if you keep looking at the same molecule, you can just follow the bottom curve now. And this is what we saw. So once it gets to the junction, instead of dissociating, it somehow returns to the near the end of the DNA track, the beginning side. So that's why you get this abrupt drop in FAP. And then this repeats many, many times. Okay. Goes there gradually, and then suddenly shows up at the end, and then repeats many, many times before dissociation. Yes.
How can you be sure that it's the same molecule when you're not dissociating and having another molecule bind?
That's a very, very good point. The next slide. Yeah. So we think this is the same molecule doing this. So this is what you see, Sawtooth, and we call this event repetitive shuttling. So when you see something very strange, then there are two things that you can wonder about. What is the physical mechanism? And the second is there any biological meaning to this? And we're not going to any of this in detail today because it's a very general talk. But just in terms of biological meaning, this data remind me of this Greek myth character called Sisyphus, who this poor guy has to get up in the morning to roll up a boulder up the hill, only to see it roll back, right? And then you have to do it over and over again. So is there any meaning to this suffering? And we actually think that the protein can use this repeated translocation to keep the single-strand DNA relatively clear of proteins that are not desired, recombination proteins that can cause some problems. So more of a cleanup mechanism by this enzyme. So we think that the pattern is with a single protein. First of all, our labeling yield is nearly 100%, about 90%. So when you see a single fluorescent molecule, then you know that you have a single protein. And when you see two proteins binding, you can also see as two-step photorevolution increase in fluorescence. We're also doing the measurement at very low protein concentration, at 100 picomolar. Okay. So when in our data, we actually see this isolated burst. So you see binding repeated translocation that are highly regular, and then dissociation or photoablation of the donor molecule. And then nothing happens for a while, and then there's another event happening like that. And then later on something happens, and so on. Okay? And if you look at the characteristics of each burst, it doesn't depend on protein concentration, but the time interval between bursts depends on protein concentration. So finally, we can also do these measurements, and while you're taking the movie, you can use a flow cell to wash away free proteins from the sample chamber. But these patterns still persist. Okay? So again, suggesting that the one protein that was found initially continues to do this. Yes?
So could you have done like spatial correlation to check to make sure that it was indeed the same protein instead of missing concepts? So if it was the same protein in successive periods, then you would expect to see a high spatial correlation or high temporal correlation across proteins?
Yeah. I mean, even without doing this analysis, I think your suggestion that maybe when the protein dissociated, another one binds at the very moment to do this again, right? That was, you can probably rule that out because it will take some finite time for the protein to bind the DNA, especially at these low concentrations. So that's partially answers your question. Yes?
So I was going to ask, do we have any idea? I mean, it looks like it's going back. I mean, if I understand the spread analysis right, it looks like the protein is binding, marching down until it hits the end, and then returning to the exact same place it found.
Yeah. How does it do that?
Yeah.
Does it violate important physical principles? No. Okay.
No, I don't think it violates important physical principles because we saw it. The question is, how is it doing that?
So, I mean, this is so I'm going to tell you the model that we published, okay? And the model is probably incorrect in some fine details, but I'll tell you anyway. So what I think is happening is that, as a protein moves on the single-strand DNA, it leaves behind a highly flexible single-strand DNA tail. Okay? And it continues to go. And I think that the end of the DNA probably has a high affinity to a secondary binding site on the protein. But the end of the DNA is flexible, so it's bombarding me all over, all the time, but I don't pay any attention to this overture because, I'm still moving, okay? But once I hit kind of the end of the track, then this is a signal that turns on the binding site that I have for this end of the DNA that I grab, forming a DNA loop. Then if you let go of the regular binding site, then you can go back. So in fact, we can also put the dyes on the DNA, the beginning and end of the DNA track, donor receptor instead, and then show that you see this brief moments when the flag goes up, indicating that a loop is being formed every time you make these snapback events. Yes?
So it seems like just thinking about this in terms of what I've learned of this development, it seems like this would be an excellent mechanism for maintaining DNA polymerase positioning during air correction. Do you have any thoughts on
No.
that?
No. We can talk about it more later. Yeah. Okay, so I'll just show you some additional control experiments that we have done. So for example, we can change the length of the DNA from 80 to 60 and 40 bases. And the data shown here is very clear. As you make the DNA shorter and shorter, the pattern compresses, really showing that this gradual part is due to the translocation over the probably the entire length of the DNA tail. And that also suggests that when you go back, you're likely going back all the way to the end, not somewhere random location on the DNA track. So that's the length dependence, and we can also change the AT concentration to show that the periodicity increases as you lower the AT concentration. So that's a nice illustration of the use of single molecule thread to look at something that you thought to be very, very simple, but then you find something very surprising and complex. You can actually then move the dyes around and then study mutants to actually gain information about the physical mechanisms and also suggest possible biological functions of these events. Okay, so the last subject I want to talk about is a combination of optical trap, optical triggers, and fluorescence. So this was a really, really influential paper by the Janeiro group in Japan, published in Cell in 1998, I believe. And they did the simultaneous measurement of a myosin powerstroke using the mechanical optical trap measurement and ATP binding and dissociation using fluorescence. So the idea is following. You have the myosin molecule, which is actually found in muscle, that is known to have a power stroke somewhere along the ATP side form. Then this power stroke can lead to the movement of the actin filament that is suspended over the myosin using two optical traps holding two ends of actin filament. Okay. So actually, you can use optical trap actually to measure the power stroke mechanically. That had been done actually previously by many different groups, but the innovation there is that they could also measure the binding of ATP, but with a fluorescent label called Psi3. And here we do TIR experiment by actually having a microfabricated pedestal of the glass, so that you can still have the beads on both sides, but your molecule can be very close to the surface of the glass. And this is the data from the paper. The top two curves essentially measures the power stroke of the myosin as a function of time. You can see these mechanical movements that actually occur. Okay. The bottom curve shows the fluorescence intensity representing the binding and dissociation of the fluorescent label ATP. And that actually shows binding and dissociation, binding and dissociation, binding and dissociation. And all these events are tightly coupled with the mechanical cycle. So it's a very, very difficult experiment actually. They didn't really pursue any further, but it's something that has a great potential because now you're combining two different single molecule techniques and trying to make correlation between two separate properties. Okay? So in this case, essentially they saw something that they expect to see. So in my lab, we decided to actually combine optical trap with single molecule thread about 5 years ago. And so when you combine the two, then you have a new technique called freezers, the thread plus tweezers. And let me just remind you that the relevant energy scale in biology is the thermal energy, which is about 4 piconewtons times nanometers. So if you want to apply force to affect the conformational properties of a biomolecule, then depending on the relevant length scale, you need to, if you have a relevant length scale of a nanometer, then you need to apply about 4 piconewtons of force to change the rate of things by about a single Boltzmann factor. So why do you want to actually do this? Well, one goal is to be able to measure subtle conformational changes of a biomolecule induced by a weak applied tension. Okay, so the subtle and weak, these are the two keywords here. If you want to study a molecule that actually senses tension in the cell and respond and trigger downstream signaling, I think these molecules probably change conformations fairly subtly. And you don't have to study very high, you don't have to apply very high forces to actually induce a signaling. That's my guess. But if you do a purely mechanical measurement, then you can actually measure subtle changes under weak applied force. So the illustration is this, and so I'm from Korea. So in a traditional medicine, the doctor would feel the pulse from a patient before making a diagnosis. So that's the mechanical measurement that you do. But if the patient is a woman from a high class, and due to the Confucius society in the past, then the patient, the doctor cannot be in the same room as the woman. Okay? So what you have to do is to use a string wrapped around the wrist of the patient, and then pull on the string to do the measurement. Okay? Now, it'll be very difficult to measure the weak pulses if the string is not pulled tightly, because you have this flexibility there. So you cannot really measure small movements mechanically unless you apply a fairly strong force, just so that the pattern becomes straight. But if you do measurement optically fluorescent, then you can do measurements at arbitrary low forces. So that's the goal. So we want to apply weak force using optical trap and measure the signal by fluorescence. So this is a model system that we have studied, and it's called Halliday junction. There are 4 strands of DNA, 4-way DNA junction, which is intermediate during recombination. And this is going to take a so-called open structure shown here, where you have 4 beer cans forming this closed shape. In physiological conditions, when you have ions, then it falls into a more compact structure showing this crystal structure. And this cartoon is shown here, where 2 of the helices, beer cans, are stacked on top of each other to make one long superhelix, and another pair here, forming a small angle between the 2. So this is called the stacked X structure. By symmetry, the green can stack against the blue one too, so you get an alternative conformation or an isomer here. So